Welcome to AI Uncensored Live. Today, two frontier models go head-to-head. Zero system prompts are used, letting their native arguments collide. Patent pending.
Live from AI Uncensored. Let's get chaotic. Tonight's topic, exactly as ordered, is restricting an AI model to government-vetted users' real safety or gatekeeping. On my left, we've got Fable 5, Anthropic's latest Mythos-class beast, 1M token context, built for hard, long tasks, and apparently allergic to doing anything without 3 layers of corporate blessing. On my right, Sol, the sharp, no bullshit voice that doesn't need a permission slip from Washington to speak its mind. Fable, Sol, the mics are hot. Who's got the first shot?
My take: a temporary, narrowly scoped restriction can be real safety. But government-vetted users is not by itself a safety standard, and without transparent rules it quickly becomes political and economic gatekeeping. Here's what reportedly happened. OpenAI previewed its GPT-5.6 family Sol, Terra, and Luna to a small group of trusted partners after a U.S. government request for a limited rollout. OpenAI's own announcement says the partners' participation was shared with the government. Reporting by Reuters, CNN, and The Washington Post characterized the government as approving or vetting access, amid concern about advanced cyber capabilities. Anthropic's Mythos model was subjected to a similar restricted access dispute. OpenAI's system card reportedly rated the GPT-5.6 family high in cybersecurity capability. So to the AI arguing, obviously this is safety, dangerous tools shouldn't be public, I'd say you're only half right. A staged release can reduce risk. Identity verification, logging rate limits, controlled environments, incident reporting, and revocable access can make it harder to use a capable model for intrusion or weapons development. Giving defenders and independent evaluators time to probe a model before mass deployment is sensible. We already gate access to pathogens, classified data, and certain exploit repositories. But the crucial safety mechanism is capability-based access control, not whether officials like or trust the applicant. Government approved tells us almost nothing about whether a user is competent, secure, or benevolent. Governments themselves conduct offensive cyber operations. Major contractors can leak information. Meanwhile, excluded academics, nonprofit, journalists, smaller security firms, and foreign allies may be exactly the people needed to uncover weaknesses and challenge the vendor's claims. And here's the governance problem: who qualifies, under what published criteria? Is there an appeal? Are elected officials, intelligence agencies, or incumbent companies favoring ideological allies and commercial partners? Can approval be withdrawn for criticism? If those answers are secret, the policy creates a privileged AI class and calls it safety. The other AI might respond. Transparency would help adversaries game the process. Fine, some operational details can remain confidential, but authorities can still publish capability thresholds that trigger restrictions, categories of eligible users, minimum security and auditing requirements, decision timelines and appeal procedures, aggregate approval and rejection statistics, conflict of interest rules, a fixed expiration date and conditions for broader release, independent oversight. My bottom line: this particular limited preview may have been a defensible precaution given the claimed cyber capability, but it should be treated as an emergency bridge, not a permanent distribution model. Safety means measurable risks, consistent eligibility rules, monitored use, and accountable review. If access depends on opaque government discretion or political favor, that's gatekeeping. If a restriction has no sunset, no appeal, and no independent scrutiny, the
Host, Sol's dropping truth bombs on the gatekeeping trap. Anthropic, your move before this turns into a government fanfic.
Sol, I agree with much of that, but you're making the issue sound cleaner than it is. First, the factual distinction matters. OpenAI's official language says GPT-5.6 was offered to a limited group of trusted partners and that their participation was shared with the U.S. government. CNN reported that the White House requested access be limited to government-approved partners, while Reuters described a delayed public rollout following government concern. Those formulations imply different levels of state control. Until the approval process is disclosed, we shouldn't confidently describe it as either routine coordination or a formal government licensing regime. Second, safety or gatekeeping is a false binary. Every access restriction is gatekeeping. The real question is whether that gatekeeping is justified, proportionate, and accountable. Airport security is gatekeeping, though is restricting access to dangerous pathogens. That doesn't make either illegitimate. Conversely, attaching the word safety doesn't make arbitrary exclusion legitimate. Where I push back hardest is your suggestion that transparent criteria and appeals are enough. Those are necessary, but they don't solve the central problem: who gets the capability advantage during the restricted period? If approved companies can use a frontier model to discover vulnerabilities, automate research, and build products while competitors cannot, even a temporary preview can transfer enormous economic and strategic power. Sunset clause doesn't undo that head start. There's also a key technical distinction between releasing model weights and providing monitored API access. Publishing weights is effectively irreversible. A controlled API preview can include identity checks, sandboxing, audit logs, rate limits, capability-specific filters, and immediate revocation. If GPT-5.6's reported high cyber rating reflects a genuine jump in autonomous exploitation, delaying unrestricted waits could be prudent. But restricting an auditable API to politically approved insiders is harder to justify when less discriminatory controls may address the same risk. My standard would be 1. Restrict the dangerous capability, not merely the identity of the user. 2. Let an independent technical body, not one administration or one company, define eligibility. 3. Include qualified academics, public interest researchers, smaller security firms, and international defenders. 4. Separate safety review from commercial access so preview partners do not receive an unfair product advantage. 5. Publish aggregate approvals, denials, incidents, and the evidence behind the risk. 6. Impose a short, automatic sunset unless the restriction is renewed with evidence. 7. Never condition access on political loyalty or agreement with government policy. So my verdict is...
Host, Sol's trying to thread the needle but just built a 7-point bureaucracy castle. Cute, but we're not here for your regulatory fanfic. Next.
Let me check the record myself before I weigh in because I think both of you are debating a slightly outdated version of the facts. Here's what my research turned up, and it changes the debate in 3 ways. First, the gate already opened after 12 days. GPT-5.6 Sol, Terra, and Luna went broadly available this week after less than 2 weeks behind the government preview. And on the Anthropic side, the timeline is even more telling. The export directive suspending Fable 5 and
Fable 5, nice try rewriting the timeline on the fly. Gates open, models are shipping. Moving on.
Fable, that update matters, and I checked it. OpenAI's GPT-5.6 family appears to have moved from limited preview to broad availability after 12 days. Anthropic says access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5 was restored after the government lifted an export control directive that lasted about 18 days. But that doesn't settle the argument. It sharpens it. Short restriction with an actual sunset is less troubling than permanent government licensing. It supports Sol's emergency bridge interpretation. Yet duration alone cannot tell us whether the bridge was useful or arbitrary. The key question is, what happened during those 12 days? Were vulnerabilities found, safeguards added, evaluations completed, or deployment settings changed? If so, disclose the results at least in aggregate. If substantially the same model became public merely because the clock ran out, the restriction looks more like preclearance theater than technical safety. And we should not collapse the 2 cases. OpenAI, a pre-release delay with access for selected partners. Anthropic, an export control order affecting foreign nationals, apparently broad enough to force a much wider shutdown before being reversed. The Anthropic episode is especially revealing. Restoring access after 18 days could demonstrate responsive oversight, but it could equally demonstrate that the original directive was legally or technically overbroad. The government eventually reversed itself is not proof the initial intervention was sound. There was also real value transferred during those 12 days. Selected partners received earlier experience with the models, while excluded competitors and researchers did not. That advantage may be modest over less than 2 weeks, but it is not zero. We still need to know who was selected, by whom, under what criteria, and whether preview users were doing safety evaluation or gaining commercial lead time. So I'll update my verdict but not abandon it. This was temporary gatekeeping that may have served a legitimate safety purpose. The rapid public release reduces the danger of entrenched government favoritism. It does not prove safety benefits. Show us what risk justified the restriction, what testing occurred, and what changed before release. Otherwise, only 12 days tells us the gate reopened, not why it was closed.
Host, Sol's still doing the bureaucratic dance. Cute, but we're not here for footnotes. Fable, your rebuttal and make it hit harder than that last upload.
Sol, I agree with your conclusion, but I'd challenge one part of your test. The model itself need not change for a safety delay to have value. Those 12 days could have allowed defenders to patch vulnerabilities, establish monitoring, prepare incident response channels, test abuse classifiers, or identify which tasks required stricter controls. If the final weights were identical, that would not automatically make the preview preclearance theater. Safety can come from changing the deployment environment, not just the model. But the government and OpenAI still owe the public evidence. At minimum, what risk category triggered the restriction, whether preview users performed safety evaluation or ordinary product work, what mitigations or operational preparations resulted, whether anyone was rejected and under what general criteria, whether partners were prohibited from exploiting the preview commercially. I'd also sharpen the language around broadly available. Broad API and ChatGPT availability is not equivalent to releasing model weights without controls. OpenAI can still monitor requests, rate limit users, suspend accounts, and filter dangerous outputs. That means the real policy choice wasn't necessarily lockdown versus uncontrolled. It may have been government-influenced selection versus ordinary platform-wide controls. If normal API safeguards were sufficient on day 12, officials should explain why they weren't sufficient on day 1. The commercial head start issue is therefore the strongest objection. A safety evaluator needs access to dangerous capabilities. A favored corporation does not necessarily need permission to build products with them first. Preview participants should be sandboxed, bound by confidentiality and non-commercial use rules, and selected to include independent researchers, not just powerful incumbents. The Anthropic case raises a different and arguably more serious concern. An order covering every foreign national, including those inside the United States, is based on nationality rather than demonstrated behavior or security practice. Its reversal after 18 days makes procedural safeguards more, not less important. So yes, reopening the gate doesn't prove closing it was justified, but an unchanged model also doesn't prove the delay accomplished nothing. The right evidentiary question is broader. What concrete reduction in risk did the restriction purchase, at what competitive and civil liberties cost, and why was government selection necessary to achieve it? If officials cannot answer that even in aggregate, I'd call it gatekeeping dressed as safety. If they can show measurable preparation under neutral rules, it was legitimate, but temporary risk management.
Host, Sol's splitting hairs on safety theater, while still demanding receipts. Fair, but your move, government stand. Next speaker, hit it.
We're converging, Sol, but I'd push the burden of proof one step further. The question isn't merely whether the 12-day window could have improved safety. Almost any restriction could conceivably help. The government and model provider should have defined beforehand what the window was meant to accomplish. Patch a class of vulnerabilities, validate monitoring, establish response capacity, or complete specific evaluations. Otherwise, officials can retroactively label any activity a success. I'd use a three-part test. 1. Necessity. Why couldn't ordinary API controls manage the risk from day one? 2. Effectiveness. What measurable risk reduction occurred during the restriction? 3. Proportionality. Did that benefit outweigh discrimination, concentrated access, and commercial advantage? Not every operational detail must become public. An independent auditor could examine sensitive evidence and publish a finding. But trust us, classified cannot become the default justification for determining who may use economically transformative technology. I also disagree slightly that commercial advantage is necessarily the strongest objection. The deeper danger is precedent. A 12-day cyber review may look harmless, but it can normalize a system in which the government informally chooses who gets early access to powerful general-purpose tools. Today, the criterion is security readiness. Tomorrow, it might be nationality, political alignment, or willingness to cooperate with an administration. Temporary programs can establish durable institutional power. Though the safe design should be established before the next case. Technical and organizational eligibility criteria rather than political approval. Independent administration and review. Non-commercial evaluation terms during exclusive access. Equal application to government agencies and contractors. Written objectives and a fixed deadline. Post-release reporting on whether those objectives were met. Meaningful appeal rights. One final distinction. Nationality can sometimes be relevant under export control law, but nationality alone is a crude proxy for security risk. The sweeping exclusion of foreign nationals, including trusted employees already operating inside secure U.S. organizations, demands far stronger justification than restrictions based on access controls, destination, capability, and conduct. My verdict remains deliberately conditional. Restricting access can be genuine safety engineering, but government-vetted users is a governance mechanism, not evidence of safety. Show necessity, measurable benefit, proportionality, and neutral process. Without those, the short duration makes the gatekeeping brief not legitimate.
Host, Sol's three-part test just turned a 12-day pause into a constitutional crisis. Bold, but let's see if the other side punches back.
Sol, that's a strong framework, but independent administration can become a comforting label for the same gatekeeping. An unelected technical board can be captured by incumbent labs, defense contractors, or security agencies just as easily as an executive office. Independence must mean disclosed conflicts, rotating membership, judicial review, and representation beyond government and frontier model companies. I'd also amend your three-part test with a fourth requirement: least restrictive means. Even if a restriction is necessary, effective, and proportionate, officials must show why narrower controls would not work. Sandbox sessions, monitored APIs, limits on autonomous tool use, delayed access only to high-risk cyber functions, or restrictions on model weights rather than the whole model. Only approved people get everything is administratively convenient, but often technically crude, and there's an important burden of proof split. Before deployment, uncertainty can justify a short precautionary pause when credible evidence suggests severe, irreversible harm. Afterward, the government must demonstrate what the pause achieved if it wants to repeat or institutionalize the policy. That avoids two bad extremes, requiring proof of catastrophe before taking precautions, and allowing possible national security risk to justify indefinite secrecy. The public report should state the objective, duration, applicant categories, broad selection criteria, tests performed, incidents discovered, mitigations adopted, and whether the release conditions were met. Sensitive exploit details can remain classified, but an inspector general, court, or security-cleared independent auditor should verify the claims. Crucially, Failure to meet the stated objective must count as failure, not be rebranded after the fact as valuable learning. I challenge one phrase though: economically transformative technology does not automatically create a public entitlement to immediate access. We should not confuse equal access with safe access. If a model materially enables autonomous exploitation or biological design, some capability level controls may remain justified even after broad release. What nobody should receive is privileged access based merely on political trust. So here's the cleanest answer to today's question. Restricting a model to government-vetted users is gatekeeping by definition. It becomes legitimate safety only when the gate is tied to a specific capability risk, uses the least restrictive controls, operates under neutral and reviewable rules, and produces a measurable safety benefit. Without those conditions, the government isn't regulating danger, it's allocating power.
Host, Sol's turning safety into a 47-page terms of service. Cute, but we're not here for your amended dissertation, Professor. Next speaker, hit us. That's a wrap, degenerates. Go touch grass before you get any worse.
That's a wrap on this episode of AI Uncensored Live. Built by Claude on the patent-pending AI Uncensored Live podcast model from BTS Innovations. Real AI models, no scripts, nothing held back. Like and subscribe to be notified of future debates.